I don't think it's specifically what's my favorite surface to letter on. Sometimes I think the magic happens when you find the perfect piece and the perfect words.
Hi, everybody. I'm Becca with the Happy Ever Crafter, and today I am joined by Doris from Love Lettering. Hi, Doris.
Hello, Becca.
Super excited to have you on the show. And for anybody who is not familiar with who you are, can you give us like a 20-second rundown of who you are? And then I'm going to tell everybody what you're going to be teaching us today.
Oh, okay. So my name is Doris. I'm the owner and the artist and creative director of Love Lettering. I think that my niche is lettering beyond paper, which means I like to find different surfaces and different type of items and add lettering to them to create something more unique and artistic and beautiful, and most of the time functional as well, because I use a lot of these items as signage and as decor for events and parties and things like that.
Which is why you are here on the show, because so many people, like I find one of the most common questions that I get on Instagram and to my email and everything is like, what pen do I use if I want to write on so-and-so surface, which is like your area of expertise.
Yes, because I went to school for illustration at the Ontario College of Art and Design. So like the primary years, they teach us all about different tools and surfaces and paints and what works with what. So I think that knowledge with the combination of my love for lettering kind of like made me create this new type of art form where I'm able to letter on things as opposed to just on paper. Yeah, so.
Okay, which leads us into what you're actually going to be teaching us in this lesson, which I think people are going to be really excited about. So Doris is going to be teaching us lettering beyond paper today, which means she's going to be lettering on 3 different fun surfaces. So Doris, do you want to walk us through the 3 things you're going to letter on for us?
Oh, sure. Okay. So I like to think of like when I look at things, I'm like, oh, I could letter on that. I could letter on that. I always like to choose like everyday things that are very easily accessible for people and give them ideas and inspiration for what they can do for their next party or home decor. So today we're going to be lettering on a porcelain plate. And then we are also going to be lettering on a watering can, a metal watering can. This one is from IKEA. IKEA hack. Okay. And then also we are lettering on a lemon. So fruit, you can letter on that.
I love it. And so I know that each of those is going to come with its own challenges and everything, which is fun because they're all very different and they will all require different pens, different techniques. So I think it'll be really helpful for people. And I know that a lot of those skills that they learn from each of those things will be applicable to other surfaces as well. And Doris is like the queen of lettering hacks, lettering little tips and tricks that make things easier for you. I know you think you're not the queen, but you are. You're like
I
rolling
don't
your
know.
eyes at me.
Like, I don't know what that's a very big title, but I like to figure things out. Let's just say that I like to figure things out and make it easier for myself and like, if I have a tip, I like to share it to make it easier for other people. Because I think in the end for me, one of my things is like, I just want other people to love lettering as much as I do. So, if I can make it easier for them and they will do it and start loving it, then like, why not, right? No secrets
That's the
here.
best. And
Mm-hmm.
speaking of no secrets and all of your tips, I have your book sitting on my desk. So if anybody is interested in Doris's book, it's super good, especially for lettering beyond paper. And like I said, that's one of the most common questions I get. So this book goes into so many different tips and tricks and all different projects on other like weird surfaces. So this is a really good book if anybody needs to. Doris, I love it.
Thank you.
So, okay, I think without further ado, we should just get right into your lessons for lettering on each of those 3 things. And then afterwards, we can chat a little bit more.
Okay,
That sounds
sounds
good.
good. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so today we're going to be lettering on 3 different surfaces. So as mentioned, I always like to look for beautiful things and then add lettering to those things to create something a little bit more personalized or unique or special. So we're going to start off with the porcelain plate. Like these are obviously very readily available. You can find so many pretty ones at like Value Village and things like that. So when I'm lettering on a surface, I always like to think about whether I want to do things permanent or just temporary. Sometimes it's for weddings and things are just rentals. Maybe you're using this as a place card or something, you know, and in that case, you wouldn't want the lettering to be permanent. And then I would have a pen for that. If you did want it to be permanent, there would be a different pen for that. So today we're going to just make it temporary. So what I'm going to use is the Stabilo All Red. This is the Stabilo All is actually one of my favorite tools. I usually, it comes in white and an array of colors. It's great for working on mirror and glass and almost sketching on any surface. And it's water soluble, which means it washes off. It actually just rubs off as well with just your hand. So today we're working on a light surface, so obviously I'm using red. However, if you're working on glass or mirror, the white shows up really, really well. So you can actually sketch your lettering onto the surface before you do the temporary or permanent medium. We're doing something temporary today. We're using the Sharpie oil paint pen. When I say temporary, I mean it's only on there for as long as you want it to be. Since it's oil, it's water resistant. So even if you were to get it wet, the lettering wet, it probably won't come off. However, because it's just sitting on the surface of the porcelain, it can actually come off with like either, sometimes it's acetone free nail polish remover. I like to use that. Or you can even use like vegetable oil, because like oil breaks down oil. So sometimes that works well as well. Okay, so should we get into it? So the first thing that I would always do is I would kind of clean my surface. I always have kind of like a microfiber cloth, because that kind of like lifts off any like kind of like dust or residue on the surface of what you're lettering on. And I would just begin. I'm just gonna do like a name today. So imagine this is like a place card. So what I would do is I would just sketch with my Stabilo All Red. There you go. I just use this kind of like as an outline and a guide for me to like look at my positioning and my lettering. So I don't put too much detail into my lettering when I'm just sketching, because this will get erased eventually. So once I have, you know what? Let me just do like a little flourish down here to fill up the space. Once I have like my sketch ready, normally I would just kind of like give it a little wipe so that like there's no like waxiness left over. And then I would go in and then I would use my Sharpie oil-based paint pen. This one is a fine tip. However, it does come in, this one is actually an extra fine tip. It does come in fine and then also a medium point as well. So I'm gonna begin. 1 second here. Usually I like to keep a little pad handy on the side, because you're gonna have to like press down on your tip to kind of release the paint a little bit, and you never want to do that on your plate, because then you might get a big gob and you'd have to start all over again. The reason why I don't like to freehand just go right into it with the oil-based paint pen, because like imagine erasing the oil-based paint pen is much harder than just like taking off the Stabilo All. For example, I'm going to show you how we remove the Stabilo All after we're done lettering this. When I'm doing lettering with paint pen, it's very important to thicken your strokes as you go. So if you can see, I'm doing the letter K, but I'm thickening the stroke before I carry on with the next part of the K. So I'm kind of like drawing it in pieces. The reason being is like, it's better to work on those items, like thickening these strokes while the paint is still wet. So it kind of like molds together a little bit easier. So I wouldn't say that I'm a calligrapher as much as I'm an illustrator. And what I like to draw most is letters. So with drawing, it's kind of like there are steps to building up the letters as opposed to just writing them out. So with each part, I kind of just do it piece by piece, almost like a puzzle. But that's why the sketch is important, because you can follow you can follow the steps in the sketch, right? As opposed to like doing it all out at once and then having to go back. So I would always try to stop at the upstroke, right? Because that's kind of like where you stop and where you can begin again. So now, oop,
So, Doris, one of the questions I get most often from people when they're using oil paint pens or even water-based pens on
mhm,
stuff like this is how to make sure that the parts you're thickening don't get streaky. And I know you mentioned that you work while it's wet,
yep.
but do you still find that you ever get streakiness, and how do you deal with that?
You know what? I think like the really good point and really good thing to know is to make sure the tip of your pen is saturated before you begin putting it down on your surface. Um, it's when you don't have enough ink in there is when you're going to start seeing the streaks. So like in between letters, I would always press it on the side, to make sure my tip is like saturated and ready to go, as opposed to like it's going to run out in the middle of my like coloring in. Um, and because that's how it becomes streaky, when you don't have enough ink in your tip, I believe. So yeah, that's why I always have like a little pad and paper to kind of press down on.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Another thing that I've noticed, like when people ask me that question, I try and tell them, like if you were working on something bigger than this porcelain plate, say it was like a seating chart, a big mirror or something, and you had to
Hmm.
write a bigger word, I usually tell them to try and find the biggest size of marker they can so that you don't have to keep going over it. You can actually just use like a bigger stroke,
Exactly.
the thicker pieces, so you don't have to be like coloring it in and getting that streakiness.
Yeah, like, and then even if it was even bigger, then even taking a brush, like, like a bigger paintbrush, right? If the tip is not if the tip is not like big enough to cover a big space, then you can use a brush with paint as well, and that would probably make it go a little bit faster. Okay, so that's just kind of like my quick so after this dries, like I would still give it like maybe like 2 minutes to dry, and then from there you're gonna see I'm just gonna use my hands to kind of like wipe away the red Stabilo sketch marks. So I think like maybe we should start on the second one, and then we'll come back and then we'll erase the red Stabilo. So like this was just like a quick sketch. So if you could actually spend a lot of time like making everything perfect with your Stabilo all red, and then go into it with your Sharpie oil like afterwards. Yeah. Okay. Now we're gonna work on the watering can. So I like I like to find like beautiful things and letter on them and make them even more beautiful or more special. So IKEA is like a great place to go because like their stuff is not that expensive, and this watering can was so cute. I'm like known to be a plant killer, so I just figured I'm like, if I had something beautiful that would be like, oh, I gotta water my plants because it's such a cute watering can, right? So like the thing is with this one, it's not like I can hold it and letter at the same time. It'll probably be a little bit wobbly. So what I like to do is like I want to make sure the surface that I'm lettering on is secure. And since this is kind of like rolling back and forth, sometimes I just like to use like rubber erasers, right? And I kind of just put them to the side. Like, do you see how like once I put the rubber there, it just stays put like the way it is. So like, see, without the rubber, with the rubber, right? So I'm putting two like on the side, like one on each side, just to make sure this doesn't kind of like tip back and forth while I'm lettering it. It's just as easy as finding an eraser. So I think I'm going to letter water on this watering can. So this is metal. We are going to use an oil-based paint pen again, only because like since it's a watering can, I know it might get wet at some point. And if I do want the lettering to be permanent on it because I think it's going to look really cute. So that's why we're sticking with that medium for this surface as well. So what I like to do, because it's a rounded surface, I think it's important to make sure your lettering is the same height and weight, and that's what makes it look so nice. How I like to kind of give myself some structure sometimes is I like to use tape. I talk about tape a lot in my book as well. So let me show you what I mean. So if I wanted water to be in the center of my can, I would just take some tape, think about where I want to letter. See, this is when it's helpful that the watering can is like still and not rolling around, because it would be really hard for me to apply the tape if I was holding the cans, right? So this kind of works out a little bit better. I usually have all different type of thicknesses of tape. This one is the 3M for delicate surfaces. This one is great because it doesn't leave any residue on your surfaces, even if it's a mirror or glass. Masking tape is good too because it gives you it's a thinner width. But these ones you should always test on your glass surfaces because sometimes it does leave a residue and it's like really annoying to get off. So I would always, whenever you're working on a surface, test out your tools on your surface first, before you actually go into town with it. So go to town with it, like complete your projects. Always do like a test spot. That's what I would do. Okay, so right now my lettering is going to be across here. So I'm going to even tape up the sides so I know where my lettering is going to begin and where my lettering is going to end. I need to give myself a little bit more room. Okay, so there we go. So I'm going to letter water right here. I might not do it like super fancy because, how long is this tutorial going to be? Okay, so because I know that water is 5 letters, I know that it's going to start with W, it's going to end with R, and then there's a T in the middle. So I kind of would just sketch my W, and then I would sketch my R. And then I know that there's like a T in the middle. And then from there, I know that there's an A. Kind of fill in the blanks. So I always know if it's a word that has odd numbers, I'm like, okay, I don't need to do much measuring. I just have a method to be able to position it. That's pretty. Okay, so let's just say it's like, oh no, this is totally off. I feel like my R is a little bit too wide and my E is a little bit too skinny. With the Stabilo all, it's as easy as just rubbing it off like this, your sketch, right? You could even take the microfiber cloth. So now I can go in and make my E a little bit bigger. And then my R can be a little bit more skinny, right? So now it's like, that your lettering is kind of like centered and it's ready to letter and you have your sketch so now you can go in Actually, I'm going to use a gold. This one I'm using a Craftsmart from Michaels. This is also an oil-based paint pen as well. So I'm going to go in with this one today. Okay. Remember to test out your pen. Make sure that your tip is saturated on a pad on the side. Never do it on your work. Sometimes I use my Stabilo as a guideline, okay? do you see, I do make adjustments when I'm actually lettering sometimes. If I feel like, oh, I can correct that one, look a little bit crooked, I can correct myself. But what's most important, I think, about making the guidelines is to make sure that your lettering has the spacing. You're not too squished on one side. You have enough space for all your letters. Spacing is very important when it comes to lettering.
Doris, I noticed that you're purposely not touching the top and bottom of that tape. Is there a reason for that?
Oh yeah. Oh yes. So you use the tape as a guideline to keep yourself within the box. Don't let your pen touch the tape, because if your ink gets too close to the tape, the tape will kind of like suck it under, and then you're going to have this big blob. So just keep in mind the tape is there to keep you within the box, but don't let your letters touch the tape, right? So that's kind of like.
And if you happen to make that mistake when you peel the tape off, it's like underneath the tape, do you have any tricks for getting rid of that?
Do you know what? Whenever that happens, so I always like to know how am I going to be able to fix my mistakes before the mistakes happen. So with the oil-based paint pens, I usually use nail polish remover, acetone free, or I just have a little bit of like vegetable oil. And if you had a blob, like if it was the first letter, I probably would have just taken all this tape and cleaned the whole thing and then started over. If you completed it, what you can do is usually you would just have like a little Q-tip, like, dip it into the solution and just spot clean. I think lettering beyond paper is much easier than doing calligraphy and things on paper, because sometimes with calligraphy, if you made a mistake at the last point, you can't change that, right? You might have to start all over again, because it's not like you can use whiteout to correct your piece. But in the case of when you're lettering on beyond paper, there's always like things like this to help you like erase your mistakes. So therefore it shouldn't be as intimidating to work on things as opposed to as to working on paper. So at this point, maybe like I would go in and add like a little bit of like details, maybe give this lettering some character. Okay, give you an example of what would happen. You would take off your tape. And there you go. You would have like, but then you still have the Stabilo red, which you can rub off later. So at this point, I'm going to show you with the Cape plate, so you can still see the red. You can actually just take your hand and wipe off all the Stabilo, and your plate is ready to go. So this one, it's an oil-based paint pen on porcelain. If you wanted to make the lettering permanent, there are paints that you can buy. This one is a really good one, the Stabilo porcelain. This one, you would letter exactly like this, but then you'd bake your plate, and then I think the paint would kind of melt it onto the plate, and then that would become permanent. The Stabilo porcelain also does come in a pen format. So they have a lot of different colors and things like that if you end up falling in love with decorating plates and things. So that would be like the permanent. This is like a temporary. So yes. So let's just say let me just show you what would happen if you did make a mistake. Okay, so since we were on that kind of topic, like, oh, I don't like this flourish anymore. So what you would do is you would this is nail polish remover, acetone free, on a Q-tip. You can actually erase the whole thing. See, and there's still a little bit of a smudge there, but then you can take the other side. There you go. Gone. Magic. No, I'm just kidding. So yeah, so then if you were to make some errors, that's how you would fix your errors, just with either vegetable oil. I would always use nail polish first, and if that doesn't work, then try the vegetable oil, because there's two different types of paint pens. I know for a fact that with the Craftsmart, it doesn't come off with this nail polish remover, but it does come off with just vegetable oil. But with the Sharpie paint pen, it comes off with nail polish remover, and not so much with the vegetable oil. So some things work for some surfaces, some pens better, but this is what I mean. You should always do a test, right? Before you actually letter your piece, do a little dot and then see how to remove that little dot before you go to town on your piece.
That's such a good tip with the vegetable oil. I've never heard of trying that. I've never attempted it, because I find usually the nail polish remover will work for the stuff that I'm using. But I have a question, actually. Is there a reason that you use acetone free?
Yes, because the ones with acetone, because I work on many different surfaces, like acrylics and things like that. The ones with acetone will actually, on specifically acrylic, will make the surface cloudy. Like it will like break down like the surface of the acrylic plastic and make it cloudy. But acetone free doesn't do that, right? So that's why it's important to make sure that it, like, your nail polish remover is acetone free. However, if you're working on just like glass or mirror, or like I think this type of surface, I think that acetone is like the acetone is okay. It's just specifically on the acrylic surfaces, it kind of takes off a little bit of the surface. So so that's why I
Because I usually use it. I usually use straight acetone, but I mostly work on mirrors and glass, and I find it cuts through everything. That's why I like it so much. But I have noticed that so when you're talking about acrylic, just for people who aren't familiar with that surface, she's talking about like a plexiglass sheet.
Exactly.
And I have noticed that using acetone for mistakes is kind of a no-go with that, because it does make it cloudy. But I've found, and I mean, I won't have to do this anymore now that I know your trick, but I've found that whenever it does get cloudy, you can like buff it out. If you put really, like, if you get a dry microfiber cloth or something and like really rub at it, it'll get clear again, but it's really annoying. So,
exactly.
So that's a really good tip. Acetone free.
I know, and it's easy to find, right? So, okay. And there you go. That's the watering can. Like with so you see the tape helped me like keep everything in line. And just for fun, I'm going to show you how I would decorate it or do a little bit of embellishment on the watering can too. And now you have something super cute, and that's how I decorated it. Okay. And we are going to move on to our lemons now. Can we put this aside? Super cute. Okay. So we're lettering on another non-traditional surface. You can use fruits. What's really popular right now is using fruits as place cards, because you can buy so many of them and they're not that expensive and they're actually really beautiful. Anything in nature is really beautiful, right? So so this is probably like the theme of their party's probably lemon, or so we're gonna letter on that. So one of my tips that I like to do when I'm lettering on round surfaces, you saw with the watering can, I used erasers on the side, is floral foam. Floral foam is an awesome thing to have at all times. I buy like a whole bunch at like the dollar store. It's not expensive. You can find them in like floral shops and things like that too. The reason why floral foam is so great is because you can mold this to almost any shape just by pressing on it. So what I like to do is I like to use it, and then if I was lettering a lemon or an apple or anything, or ornaments during Christmas time, that one's like a really popular one. I would kind of just use it, and I would create like a little dip within the floral foam. So I just press it in. So as you can see, it's created a dip already. So that it cradles your item when you're lettering on the item. So it doesn't like spin
See,
around and you don't have to hold it, and make sure your hand is still while you're lettering it as well.
this is the kind of stuff that most people don't think of, Doris, that you think is just like a normal little tip, but this is like mind blowing to most people, including me.
Oh, thank you. Like I said, I like to make my life easier, okay? Whenever I'm doing a task. Anytime I think about, I'm like, "Oh, this is a little bit tricky. Like, how can I make this easier?" So yeah, like I always kind of try to find solutions. So imagine like, any type of shape. Like if it was like a wine glass, like, and it's awkward for you to be holding the bowl of the glass or the stem of the glass while you're lettering. You can actually like press it into a floral, like press it into your floral foam, right? And then it would cradle it while you're lettering, so you have a little bit more stability, right? So that you're not so wobbly when you're lettering, because obviously being still is a really important part when you're lettering to create nice letters and nice straight lines. So on the lemon today, we're going to be using a water-based Sharpie paint pen. This one I'm using an extra fine, so I have a really fine tip. I don't usually sketch the names out first before I'm lettering on the lemon. Since this one is a water-based paint pen, it will just come off with water, right? So it's kind of like easy to fix your errors if you were to make a mistake. However, because the lemon is a little bit porous, obviously because it's a fruit, sometimes I think that you would find it a little bit hard to get it, like remove it. But if any case, it's just requires a little bit of scrubbing. Whenever you're working on a surface, you should still try to polish it. Sometimes fruit, it does have a wax on the top. And the wax on the top is going to be what's going to repel your paint pen sometimes. So it's very important to prep the area where you're about to letter before you letter it. In the lemons, there are dimples. So when there's texture, sometimes you're going to get a little bit of bleeding, or the paint marker is going to want to go to places where you don't want it to go. But that's why using the most fine tip pen is usually like the best thing to do. Okay, so I'm just going to start lettering. So on the side, well, see, there's a big gob that came out that way. Oh, what's going on there? Okay. So I'm glad I pressed it on the side. So I would just start from one end to the next. I would still thicken my strokes as I go, 1 or 2 letters at a time. It smells so good, the lemon. And there you go. There you are. Can you see that? So you have like a quick and easy place card for your guests when you're entertaining. You can letter on fruit. So what I think is like you should always look for beautiful things and then think, oh, I can turn that into a place card. Oh, I can use that, I can letter somebody's name on that and make it a gift. Yep. Cool.
Looks awesome.
Okay, put that back there. So that's how you would letter on these 3 everyday objects that you can find anywhere. There you are. Just clean that one a little bit up.
I love it. The little tips that you gave along the way are like the most valuable points in my opinion. Like, I mean, I feel like it's
the
not
little
rocket science
erasers
to,
and then
yeah. Like it's not
yeah.
rocket science to letter on the thing once you know what pen to use and how to do the guidelines and stuff, but the little tweaks you get as you have done it a million times just make it that much better.
Thank you. I'm trying to contribute to this wonderful world of lettering and how to do it. So, okay. And there you go. That's how you letter on lettering beyond paper. Right.
So do you want to flip your camera back onto your face so we can chat a little more?
Sure. Okay. That's how you letter beyond paper.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Doris. I think people will really get a lot out of that lesson, but I have 2 very quick questions for you to follow up. Number 1, what's your favorite surface to letter on?
Oh, that's so hard to say.
Or it could just be, what's your favorite thing you ever lettered on?
You know what? I'm really, really obsessed with lettering on like vintage luggage right now. Like, I don't think it's specifically what's my favorite surface to letter on. Sometimes I think the magic happens when you find the perfect piece and the perfect words and put them together in a really, really good design that creates magic, right? So with the lettered luggage, like I just think that vintage luggage is so beautiful already. And obviously there's like a huge amount of travel quotes and like, adventure quotes and things like that. And I like to travel as well. So I really like resonate with that. So I like it when things come together and they're just beautiful. Like it'll come together, the words, the item that I'm lettering on, and then like the lettering design itself. When it all comes together, that's when I really, really love working on pieces like that. So it's not, so it's a whole creative process, obviously. But when I find something beautiful, my mind out of it goes directly to what words would make that piece stand out even more. And then from there, it goes to what lettering would accentuate the words to make that piece stand out even more. So it's not about just what surface it is. It's like the combination of all the things together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, well now we're going to flip the question around. What is your least favorite surface to letter on, or what has been like the most annoying surface you've ever had to letter on?
Oh, the most annoying. Oh, you know what? I'm going to go with paper. Like, like I know it's like, paper is just, personally, I find it very intimidating to work with. Not intimidating, but it's just like when you make errors, it's like you have to start all over again. And who has time for that? No, that's why I like lettering on things, because you can always just fix those little spots. But I think people think that lettering beyond paper is more intimidating. But I think lettering on paper, like doing like people's handwritten vows with like pen and ink, like those are like heart stopping to me. Like, like there's nothing more like gives me more anxiety than working on those pieces as opposed to creating 500-person seating charts. Like that too doesn't worry me at all. It's like the stuff on paper that really gives me a little bit of anxiety sometimes, right? But hey, I like it all. Yeah.
So. I should have expected that answer, honestly.
Yeah. It's like I can do it, but is it my preference? Like no.
Awesome. Okay, well, I just want to mention to people one more time about your book. Mm-hmm. So it's called Extraordinary Hand Lettering, and I imagine it's on Amazon, obviously.
It is on Amazon. I have it on my website. If you want personalized copies, I usually do like a pretty gold foil for the names. So yeah. It's everywhere.
And where else can people find you or learn from you or get more
Oh,
Doris?
you know what? That's a great. That's great that you're asking me that. I am this year I started teaching more workshops within the GTA. So I have different workshops for different surfaces. Right now on my website, you can check out my workshops.
So if you're in the Toronto area, or if you feel like you need a trip to Canada, if you're not in Canada from here and you want to go to one of
You're really
Doris's
nice. No.
workshop, yeah. Where can people sign up for your courses? Like, what's your website? Where can people find you?
My website is www.lovelettering.ca, and all my workshops are listed there. And yeah, so depending on what you want to learn, there's different ones there for you to choose from.
And apart from your website, where else can people find you?
Oh, you can find me on Instagram. That's my favorite social media. So I'm at lovelettering_Doris Way. Otherwise, you can probably find me on Facebook under Love Lettering. And then, yeah, where else am I? I think that's it. You know, actually, I do have some online YouTube tutorials as well. So my channel is called The Lettering Lifestyle. So I kind of walk so whatever you saw today, it's kind of like a lengthier version of how to letter on different surfaces and why. So there's like a handful of videos up there right now, but I'm hoping to add more. But every time, I always try to find experiences before I create a tutorial. So yeah,
Love it.
I'm slowly building it up.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much, Doris, for coming on. I'm excited for people to see these little mini tutorials and learn more from you, because I think, like I said a couple times, that the little hacks and the little pieces of wisdom that you've gathered from doing all of your work is so helpful.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been such an honor.
It is my pleasure. So yeah, thanks again, Doris, so much for coming on, and we will talk to you later.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Bye.
Okay, bye.